is closer than you think. And I mean, this week may well be the very last chance for Democrats to pass a large, significant, meaningful, change your life America, notice this when you go to the polls, kind of chunk of legislation that will define President Joe Biden's presidency, that is beloved in every respect. There is no piece of this legislation of the so-called $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. The Build Back Better plan is its official name. The media doesn't like using that because they love saying $3.5 trillion, even though it's over 10 years, but don't get me started. Anyhow, there is no part of that that polls below 50%. Most of it polls over 80%. Most of it polls over 70% with Republicans. And yet, it could go down in flames because of Republican opposition, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and a handful of bought-off Democrats like Kurt Schrader here in Oregon, Peters in California, et cetera. History shows that most democratic nations don't realize how close or how it is or how serious their fascism problem is until it absolutely overtakes them. And when it does, they're like in shock. How did this happen? What do we do? And suddenly they're just being crushed. As you know, I'm working on a new book on neoliberalism, and I've been reading the history of Chile, what happened there, when Pinochet took over. And it was like, they kind of like in a matter of a couple of days went from having a real nice country with a 4% unemployment rate and a good economy to having the military in the street, to herding thousands of so-called dissidents into the stadium and machine gun, to taking high-profile dissidents in helicopters out, cutting open their stomachs with knives so that their bodies wouldn't float, and then throwing them out of airplanes, or out of helicopters rather, into the ocean. A favorite T-shirt, by the way, among some of the right-wing militia groups, helicopters for liberals. People just don't realize that it's coming until it's already too late. I would argue this is true in Hungary. It was true in Turkey. It was true in Egypt. It was true in Russia. It was true in the Philippines. It's playing out right now in Brazil. It's playing out right now in Poland and India. And here in America, our fascism problem is a hell of a lot closer than most Americans realize. And fascism isn't just about the merger of corporate and state interests or oligarch and state interests. It also requires the repudiation of the rule of law, the repudiation of the institutions of democracy. And typically, it also includes a large chunk of racism. And that's exactly what's happening inside the Republican Party right now because of Trumpism, because this Trumpism has always been about fascism. And those few Republicans who voted in the House and Senate to impeach Donald Trump are finding their local and state parties repudiating them. And, it's these, Jewish-funded, black-controlled deep state that's working against our savior, Donald Trump. We've seen this movie before. This is how Hitler rose to power in the 30s. He was arrested in 1923 after the beer hall push. Well, it wasn't the beer hall. They left the beer hall and they went down to the Parliament building in Bavaria, in Munich, and seized it, just like on January 6th, and got nearly as far as capturing the governor of the state and imprisoning him. They didn't quite get that far. They got arrested before they got that far, and Hitler ended up in prison for 6 months, as I recall, or a year, during which time he wrote Mein Kampf and prepared his comeback, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing right now. And Republican officials are unwilling to acknowledge this, or they're gleeful about it. They think that somehow they can manage this. They've got this tiger, and they think they can ride the back of it. I mean, we saw this. We even saw this in the media when the Senate refused to vote to convict Donald Trump, and instead the newspaper said that he was exonerated or acquitted, which was neither one was the case. These are all the symptoms of a political party that's been taken over by a fascist element. And for years now, this fascist element within the Republican Party, and particularly within the base of the Republican Party, to a large extent, this is being driven from the bottom up because these people are afraid of primaries. And it has been nurtured by foreign governments, by foreign trolls, by a small number of American oligarchs, and by a large number of American white supremacists. I mean, this process began with the Reagan Revolution, and we are now at the kind of logical endpoint. Before the Reagan Revolution in '81, Congress passed things that Americans wanted. That's how we got Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, housing supports, Pell Grants for college, long-term unemployment, the minimum wage, food and drug safety, laws and agencies protecting our clean air and our clean water. Everything that the Republican Party today opposes, 100% of it. This has all been since the Reagan Revolution. Their singular focus has been on tax cuts for the morbidly rich and big corporations, and that's extraordinarily dangerous. And the main reason is because we've slid into an oligarchy, as I wrote about in my book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy. And oligarchies almost never last more than one generation. Typically, within 20 years of an oligarchy seizing power, one of two things happens. Either it reverts back to a democracy. You can see the example of that in Chile and Argentina. Or it turns into a full-blown police state, which ultimately can only be brought down by being defeated, typically in war, which is what happened in Germany, Italy, Spain, Japan. And we're there. I mean, we had an oligarchy try to take over America in the Civil War, the oligarchs from the South. And FDR called them out. And this is the exact dynamic we're seeing right now. And there's no and if Trump isn't going to be the guy in 2024, there's no shortage of Republicans who are willing to stand in for him as the neo-fascist leader, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Rick Scott, Josh Hawley. If we don't stand up and repudiate this right across the board, if we don't show up in overwhelming numbers in the 2022 election and prevent the Republicans from taking the House or the Senate, either one of those, they're going to shut down these investigations into January 6th, and they're going to set the stage for 2024.